Thank you all. Can I have the next three local board representatives, please?
Questions?
No questions.
No question. No need.
They sit with us at the same table all the time, so...
What did you say in your talk?
So we got Vanessa and Andy. On you, Andy.
Two. On the size of two. Just two.
Vanessa.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, and councillors. It's been a long afternoon.
Oh, we're only just warming up.
Just for those who probably don't know, Vanessa Neeson, Chair of the Henderson Massey Local Board. The board I represent is the population of Dunedin. And with me is Andy. And you've got...
Andy Baker.
What's your population, Andrew?
About 70,000, and I bring with me the apologies from Efeso Collins and Lydia Sosini, who are the chairs of the Otara Papatoetoe local boards and Mangere Otahu local boards.
Hold up, thank you. Right, Vanessa.
And Your Worship, you'll notice that the residents from the West are not here. I represent the working poor with 2 or 3 jobs, getting their children off to school and all the things that they have to deal with. Your Worship, we would just like the process to just happen. You know, we'd just like the councillors to get on with this. We've been hanging on the unitary plan for quite some time now. The backlog of housing need out in just my board is 652 waiting for homes on the Housing New Zealand waiting list. In the south, it's only like 150. We out west are just waiting for this to happen. So we would just like the process to happen. I've heard a lot of angry voices here and people saying fair process, but I trust the councillors around this table. You've been here... Hey. I didn't heckle either of you, ladies and gentlemen, and I actually find it extremely rude when you do it to other people.
Thank you.
So, Your Worship, I don't have very much to say. I'd just like us to get on with this, and I support the process as it's been going on.
Thank you, Vanessa. Andy.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I represent a completely different sort of community, and so Franklin is projected to take the most growth in Auckland, and you know, people see us as a little rural place, but actually we've got out of scope stuff happening in Pukekohe, and you know, that's the reality for us. I guess we have to take the brunt of what the sort of watering down of intensification is, and the extended cost of the infrastructure as you spread out. And when we face a bill of about $4 billion currently for the infrastructure, you know, as we look at the watering down, I wonder whether the people here who are determined to have it spread out will be the first people to support us when we come saying we need more money. So I look forward to that. But I guess I've heard some comments today in regards to the Unitary Plan Committee, and I reckon having 7 there was a pretty good deal, because I've been coming to the Unitary Plan Committee for 2 terms, and at all times in those terms, every single governing body member had the opportunity to come along and be part of that discussion, as did every single local board chair. And having not missed a meeting of that committee in the first term, and probably only missed about 3 this term when it didn't have anything to do with Franklin and I had other things to do out south, like counting cars on the motorway. You know, actually, and having sat at a number of other committee meetings, I think 7 was a pretty good turnout, when at some times the number of local board representatives outnumbered the governing body representatives, and we had to wait for a quorum while people just dribbled in. And I think, you know, there's a committee structure that people have sort of adopted and stuck with for 2 terms, you can't now complain about that and blame it on a process. And so, you know what, there needs to be some look around this table and with local boards, because we have a critical role to play in this. And I have looked at the resolutions that have been put today, and I understand the very, very difficult situation that council as a whole, and you in particular as governing body members, as the ultimate decision makers in this, have. But I look at those resolutions today and I actually think they go some way, some long way to getting some balance. We have to move on. We cannot have the uncertainty. And, you know, sometimes people who are elected have to make some hard decisions. And so that's me. We want to see, as Vanessa does, we want to see things moving on. And, you know, I think the Unitary Plan Committee has done a very difficult job under difficult circumstances for a long time, and has had every opportunity to have plenty of input from people.
Thank you. Right, thank you very much, Vanessa and Andy.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Was there a Unitary Plan Committee in the first term of this council?
It was the ADC he's talking about,
Yeah.
which basically did all the unitary planning.
It was a bigger committee.
Okay, and look, you know, everyone's going to have their view around the table, Councillor Dick, so we just leave it there. Okay, so can we have the officers back here, and then we're going to get into this. First thing I want you to address is the issue of legal advice. Councillor Fletcher maintained the need for independent legal advice into this process. Can you please brief us as to what that eventually was? Catherine, please.
Catherine?
And tell us who the lawyers are.
Your Worship and Councillors, we issued urgent instructions yesterday to Meredith Connell to respond to the question that I'd received from Councillor Fletcher the evening before. We've had an urgent opinion prepared. There's been 3 partners who've contributed to the analysis and the response back to you, which I think all elected members here have seen, all councillors have seen. That was Anna Adams, a public law specialist, Ian Kalper and Jeanette Jeanette Campbell, who are resource management experts. They are representing us in aspects of the unitary plan, but have not represented us in relation to any of the residential provisions. The very short points, I'm not proposing to go and discuss the advice in detail, but the questions that they directed themselves to were how council could meet natural justice interests of community members who have not made a submission on the unitary plan, but whose properties may be upzoned by council decisions, those decisions being made later after recommendations come back from the panel. Their analysis is that the natural justice considerations are set out in the legislation itself, in that the natural justice considerations for people who are not currently in the panel process, have chosen not to make submissions previously in support, were that they have a right by way of appeal to the Environment Court, and that is how, when Parliament... The analysis is that when Parliament has considered the way to weigh the tensions between getting the best plan for Auckland in a tight time frame and managing the natural justice considerations, that it's provided expressly for the panel to make out-of-scope recommendations, and balancing that ability, which is novel, it has enabled people who might be affected by out-of-scope recommendations to have an appeal right to the Environment Court if they are unduly prejudiced. Their strong advice in relation to whether the council should withdraw its evidence was no. They advised that withdrawal of the evidence, either in whole or part, would result in significant detrimental legal and practical consequences to the council and its community.
Okay, so just thank you very much. And Christine, I appreciate your request for that independent advice, and I trust that you will find it useful. Right, now I've just one final question to, and then I ask the councillors.
Are you going to allow Professor to comment on that?
No, not at all. So, Penny, or John, or James. So, just in terms of, so one of the matters that's on the floor that we will finally debate and vote on here today is the potential withdrawal of our evidence in front of the independent hearings panel. Just very briefly, you've given us bits and pieces of this, but if we did that, what's the outcome?
Thank you, Your Worship. So there are two potential suggestions there. The first is a full withdrawal of Council's evidence on zoning, and the other is a partial where the out-of-scope aspects of Council's evidence and the zoning maps is withdrawn. I'll talk first of all to the out-of-scope, which is option 1 in the agenda report. And if we could just skip to the slide. Apologies, I've got the... So this is a summary from the report. There are major implications. I'll quickly summarise them and then go through in detail. So the first one is a major disruption in our view to the hearings process, and in particular those who have submitted their evidence responding to the Council's evidence lodged in January would have evidence put before the panel that is now responding to something that's potentially significantly changed. Along with that is the potential that it could put at risk the panel's ability to meet its statutory timelines set by the government. So there is some risk there.
Yep, please.
And lastly, the council would be a minor party in the proceedings before the panel, if a party at all. Legal representation, yes. Planning and other expertise would not be present on behalf of the council at the hearings. So, and the reason for that is that the partial withdrawal, the out of scope, would result in essentially the spot zoning, the pepper potting of zoning maps, which really is unable to be supported by any planning professional that I've ever met. The council's evidence is written evidence and the maps. So yes, technically the maps could be redrawn to only rezone properties that are strictly in the scope of a site-specific submission. But the written evidence is written holistically in an integrated way about the different geographic areas of Auckland, so the written evidence before the panel from council's experts would no longer make sense. So just going through that one in detail, yes, implications that would address the concern of some members of the public, including the majority in the room here today. But it would result in a piecemeal approach to our evidence. Major issues in terms of how we would actually recast that evidence. Due date was 26th of January. Would the panel accept that evidence redrafted? If it did, which experts within council could support which parts of it? It becomes an absolute minefield in terms of where council actually sits, and that's the risk of the panel process. Major disconnect between the written evidence that's gone in and the maps that would be the council's position. The disadvantage to the submitters who've actually put their evidence in. There are about 1,000 submitters who've put in well over 1,200 pieces of evidence. Time, effort and resource has gone into that through the submissions they lodged. Their evidence would be questionable in many cases, may not even make sense before the panel. And I've gone through the other key points there. Well, there is the other issue that it's the council not being present in these hearings leaves it wide open to the panel to hear from many divergent views, from those seeking far more intensification and upzoning than the council has proposed in its current maps, and those seeking a more restrictive approach. Many private individuals, larger organisations, including the government Housing New Zealand, or primarily through Housing New Zealand, asking for significantly more upzoning than the council. So the council, not being a strong party in the proceedings, essentially is not there to moderate or provide a sort of a view in between the two. So that's the partial withdrawal. The full withdrawal, essentially similar implications.
Just hang on. Okay, now councillors, you know, so much with the community, they're by and large being respectful of the process. For yourselves, keep focused on what you've been told. You know, I'm presuming that you're all listening very intently to the advice that we're getting so that you can determine what you should do in this instance. So listen very carefully to this. Fire away, John.
Okay, so the other option, which is, I guess, the even more, get the right words here, would involve a full withdrawal of all of Council's evidence on zoning. Many of the issues that I talked about before would apply, although it's less complex because there's no sort of having to redraft evidence or think about whether that might even be possible to do.